Hi, hello, my name is Emmanuel. Um, ARC 531. Not sure what section I'm in, but my map I'm looking at today is Portugal, Nepal, and Petit Bay. Portugal, basically translated, Portugal is not a small country, and it's ironic that specific sentence is in French, um, but the historical content in question is Portuguese. When we're looking more into this map, um, okay, so Enrique Calvao is a very important figure today with this map, as he's the originator of this map. And basically, this was done in support of the then imperialist ambitions of the dictator Antonio Salazar, who was the leader at the time of Portugal. The map was produced and distributed across the country in many different formats. And different languages, including postcards, which was its main source of distribution. The map shows that Portugal and its colonies all across Africa, for the most part, it basically shows that Portugal is significantly larger and greater than every other country in Europe, including the big countries, including the greatest ones, Spain, France, England, Italy, and Germany. Basically, Portugal is big enough to rub shoulders with these guys, and they're important, and they're not to be messed with. So it's also important to note that mapping was a common form of European propaganda during this time. This was basically the great colonial divide of Africa, the African continent, and this was basically European countries' ways of propaganda and demonstrating their power was via this way of publications and maps. And so basically the idea of weaponizing maps, this is kind of like what it was essentially. Basically, this was an era where there was a lot of war happening and a lot of political fighting, and maps were definitely a means by which these countries established their power as well. Information and just circulating and publicizing as much information as they could, demonstrating how powerful they were. And this was significant. So breaking the map down a little bit better. So the red overlay, basically, as you can see, it's showing African countries, which are basically Portuguese colonies. Basically, African countries governed by Portugal. So as you can see, it's basically showing that these countries are huge, and Portugal has control of these big, huge countries. And so as you see, the red maps are superimposed over the European map. So it's basically demonstrating how big and important they were, and how much land they governed. So this was one of their main sources of propaganda. This specific map, I think, it was basically one of the earliest maps. Yeah, so Portugal was a very strong and influential republic. This map, again, Portugal is not a small country. Is basically was basically funded by the Portuguese government, led by Antonio Salazar. So he became the prime minister of Portugal during its military dictatorship, and that was in 1932. He founded an authoritarian regime, extremist regime, and it was called Estado Novo in 1933. So Salazar's regime basically demonstrated how cartography and publication can be used as a propaganda weapon in the nationalist and colonialist discourse. We see the way he did this was via 3 steps, basic steps. So as soon as this regime launched itself, the first colonial Portuguese exhibition was organized. And basically, this was not the only exhibition or event that was organized. They organized a lot of events and exhibitions. They did it all the time. They did this on a massive scale, and that was basically how they got the country's attention about this issue. During these exhibits, they would have maps. They would have all types of things that were published, or just artifacts and important things, which they would publish and demonstrate and show to people, Portuguese, just how strong they were, how important they were. They would have it in different languages too. Basically, what the modern day version of what we would call just patriotism, or just, or whatever, sportsmanship, just, my team's great, my team's the best. I'm personally a Celtics fan, so I'm all about Celtics propaganda. And then they would even further distribute this information and these maps through postcards, which would also be in different languages too, other than Portuguese. So Enrique Galvão is also another important figure, as he is the originator of this map. So he was very influential and very important to this regime, as he was the Angolan deputy to the Portuguese National Assembly. He was a very strong supporter initially of this government, and he supervised a lot of the activities that went on in Angola, and with the Angolan colonies. And eventually, however, in 1947, he kind of like switches it up. He kind of changes his mind. He's like, you know what? I don't think my government's treating these Angolan African people right. We're overworking them. So he started to demonstrate. And he started to write articles and stuff condemning the forced labor of women, children, and etc. So he basically switches from an imperialist to a sympath. It's kind of how I see it. So this like attitude shift was kind of like, I guess we could call it a change of heart. That's how it appears. So he's kind of like, you know what? I'm not really messing with this government anymore. Like, they don't treat people properly. They abuse people, and they don't care. They abuse them till they die. These people are people working in very poor conditions. The weak, the hungry, women, children, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter your age. It doesn't matter your condition. They're working them to death. So he started to speak against the government, and unfortunately, he was arrested by the government. The government kind of basically rejected his claims and accusations and said he was a liar. He was arrested in 1952. He was forcibly retired, and he ended up having to skate and run. He ran to Venezuela, where he supposedly continued to oppose the government. And this is kind of like where it ends with my story, my investigation today. But for me, I feel like what's important in all this is the takeaway I get from this is that it's important when you stand for something as strong as patriotism or just supporting a cause, that it's important to also look deeper into what you believe in and what you support. And it's nice to stand for something great and something awesome, but it's also nice to treat people right. It's also nice to not oppress and abuse people, which was basically what Galvao looked at and saw that, hey, this is, I mean, I'm proud to be Portuguese. I love that we're advancing and economically and doing great things, but we're also just treating people like garbage. And for me, that was the great takeaway from this, is just self-reflection always, and just, you know, just being better as a person and not just being great. So yeah, I think I'll end it here. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Have a great semester break.